Hear that? Is that America cheering or a sausage patty sizzling to perfection? It's time to cheer for Egg McMuffin and fresh cracked eggs at McDonald's. It's time to wake up to the aroma of freshly baked biscuits and treat yourself to a real honest-to-goodness morning meal. Breakfast, it's on at McDonald's. Now get any breakfast sandwich for just $2. Available only through the app. Mobile order and pay available at participating McDonald's. McD app download and registration required.
More than 1 in 3 people will face cancer in their lifetime. Unfortunately, fear can stop you from getting your cancer screening, but it won't stop cancer. Early detection can save your life. Don't wait for symptoms to appear to act. Cancer screening is safe, effective, and accessible for everyone, including free or low-cost screening programs. Go to cancerscreeninfo.com right now for free screening resources and recommendations from the American Cancer Society. Don't wait. Early detection can save your life. Go to cancerscreeninfo.com today. Cancerscreeninfo.com.
Welcome to the Boneyard with Steve Robertson. As always, I am your good friend and host, Steve Robertson, here on the magnificent Monday edition of The Yard. Hope things are well with you wherever you are today. It was an exciting weekend of football, as you guys are well aware. Absolute insanity, man. Alabama destroys Georgia. Really wasn't much of a game in the second half. And it's one of those things, too. It's like we always talk about the greatness of Nick Saban. I don't know that we can talk about it enough. I mean, it's one of those things, too. It's like the fact that we're alive to witness all this up close and personal is pretty cool. But how do you pick against Alabama? It's like, every time that it happens, like this is the year that a lot of people said, well, this isn't a great Alabama team. And I would venture to say that it's not as great as Alabama teams have been in the past, but here they are, number 1 seed in the playoffs. Kind of makes you kind of resign yourself to the fact that as long as Nick Saban's around, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be very difficult. Georgia can't seem to get over the hump. Nick Saban continues to be the guy that really gives them all sorts of trouble. And so now the playoffs are set. We're going to get into the bowl pairings a little bit later in the show. It's just one of those things, too. It's like we almost kick ourselves a little bit. Georgia's been so dominant defensively. I got caught up in that, too. And I don't feel bad about it. I mean, Georgia put together a historic run this year defensively. And then Alabama just does whatever they want to do. That was the thing that really surprised me, is that Georgia couldn't cover Alabama. They just couldn't do it. Now, John Mechie sadly lost for the year to a suspected ACL tear. Didn't really slow Alabama down. But I was surprised, as many of you were. I went to the Columbia High School 4A state championship game, hustled back in time to make it for the second half of that game, and it felt like it was pretty much decided at halftime. And so, well, Steve, it was still a ball game. It was. But Georgia had no juice. It's like Alabama came out and punched them in the mouth, and they were kind of like the old backyard bully, right? Nobody ever stood up to them. When somebody does, and they don't know how to play defense. We'll see what happens if there's a rematch. That was one of the things that yesterday kind of the thinking was that there were some people that would love to have an SEC semi, but not an SEC final. But the way it breaks out, Alabama and Georgia win. They're both playing for a national championship. I think it'd be really cool. And I think it's cool that Cincinnati made the playoff. It kind of quiets down some of that whole rhetoric about, well, they're always going to screw the G5 team. Give Cincinnati a lot of credit. And they beat a Houston team. And how crazy is it that Houston wins, 11 games and ends up going to a really bad bowl game? BYU, similar situation. Had a really good year, going to a really bad bowl game. There's power in the conference. All right, let's talk a little basketball before we kind of get into the bulk of the show. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this because, to be quite honest with you, football and recruiting are more important right now. But the tough weekend on the hardwood if you're Mississippi State. The ladies go down to or up to Norman, Oklahoma, and get absolutely shelled, 94-63. I didn't expect us to win this ball game. I did think it'd be a little more competitive, but the second quarter kind of proved to be the decisive quarter. We're down 6 after 1, And then they go on a 28-12 run there in the second quarter and essentially put the game away. We didn't win a single quarter. 1400 saw it happen. 2 p.m. tip. Just didn't work out for us. Leading scorer for the Bulldogs, Anastasia Hayes with 21, Rakia Jackson with 14. And everybody knows we go as she goes. She is a volume shooter, 6 of 17. Got to have a better percentage from her in order for us to win games like this. Jerkelia Jordan with 12. Those are your only 3 double-digit scores at Mississippi State. As a team, didn't shoot it exceptionally well. 36.8% as a team. Our best quarter, the first. And you close out the fourth quarter there, 5 of 17. That's just not going to get it done. 8 of 35 from three-point line. 5 of 8 from the line from free throw. We got to get to the lane more. And that's part of the problem with missing Jessica Carter is, we don't have a post player down low that we can kind of toss it down there and get a cheap basket. In worst case scenario, get to the line. But just 8 free throws for the Lady Bulldogs. Kind of tough to win a ball game like that. Really is. And it's not always about officiating. Sometimes they let them play. Other times it's about us. It's about our inability or our unwillingness to really force the action. Ladies will not be back in action until Sunday. It's finals week at Mississippi State, so there will be no basketball during finals week. The ladies return to action Sunday at 2 p.m. against UT Martin. That is an ESPN Plus broadcast. The men fared a little bit better, but it's a loss just the same. We don't believe in moral victories around here. And this is a ball game, too, that, this is a good Minnesota team. They're undefeated 7-0. We knew it would be a real challenge, talked about it on the show. We dig ourselves a huge hole early. What was it, 14-0 to start? And never really dug ourselves out of it. However, at the half, we're just down 3. 35-32. We battle back, and we get it to within 1 a couple times. And every time we got close, Minnesota would stretch it back out. They win 81-76. Mississippi State had a good night from Iverson Molinar. 39 minutes of action, 26 points for him. Pulled down 5 rebounds, 6 assists, just 1 turnover. Garrison Brooks posted double-double, 10 boards, 13 points. Those are your only double-digit scores. DJ Jeffries, 4 of 8 from the floor for 9 points. Tolu Smith, and we got to have better production out of him. I know he's rounding back into shape, but 7 points for a guy like him, playing the 5, that's not going to work. We've got to do a better job getting him touches in advantageous situations where he can get easy baskets. Just 3 of 9 from the floor, 1 of 3 from the line. State actually shot it really well from the free throw line, 11 of 13. Pulled down 14 offensive rebounds, too. 42 boards in the game for us against just 27. So we dominated the glass. We didn't dominate the shooting, though. Minnesota 49.2 from the floor, which means that our defense can pick it up a little bit. But we're 43.8% from the floor. 31% from the three-point line. They were red hot early. 12 of 29 from 3 on the game for them. Kind of proved to be the difference there. Perimeter defense, that's one of those things, too, with Ben Howland. It's almost like we're kind of content to let you take the low percentage shot. So if you can hit from outside, you're going to give us some trouble, and Minnesota did. 32 points in the paint from the Bulldogs, just 7 points off turnover. 17 second chance points. That's attributed to all those great offensive rebounds. Just 2 fast break points, though. Now, some of that's Minnesota getting back on defense, and some of that's not us pressing the action. 16 points off the bench. The game was tied just once. Mississippi State never led. Very, very interesting. All right, so that's that. And then we'll be back in action on the men's side this Saturday. Again, no games this week during finals. We'll be on the road at Fort Worth, Texas, in the Basketball Hall of Fame Classic against Colorado State. That's a 1 p.m. tip on ESPNU. So really nothing to cheer for this week when it comes to intercollegiate athletics if you're a Mississippi State fan. But we'll get back to it on the weekend. A lot of recruiting stuff to keep up with. We're going to spend a lot of time on the show talking about recruiting, kind of where we stand, how I expect to finish, and some updates on some names that you know. Let's thank our good friends at Bulldog Burger Company. Great people, man, doing a great job for some great folks needing some great food. Outstanding effort, as always, from Bulldog Burger Company. I was there last week. I'll be back again this week. Looking forward to that. Really excited about what is to come for Bulldog Burger Company. There's a lot of consistency there. That's one of the things that I love about the place, is that there is just so much consistency. I know exactly what I'm going to get when I go to Bulldog Burger Company. I know I'm going to get my money's worth, and you will too. Great food at a great price, great locations, 3 of them to serve you. Here we go. University Drive here in Star Vegas, Gloucester Street there in Tupelo, of course, the brand new one, Lake Harbor Drive there in the Richland Flowood area. Go by and check them out. Let them know that I sent you. Get the spring rolls as your appetizer, the best appetizer in Starkville proper without fail. Get that chocolate shake to go. If you love a great restaurant quality hamburger, there's no better place to go than Bulldog Burger Company. You'll be glad you went. I'm a pimentology add bacon person. I like to get, really more than I can eat, to be honest with you. And that's one of the things that makes Bulldog Burger Company so attractive is while other people are looking to downsize their portions, not them. You still get the full value. You still get the pre-quarantine portions with Bulldog Burger Company. While you're thinking of Bulldog Burger Company, let me encourage you, go to eatwithus.com and order some gift cards as Christmas gifts for the hungry people in your life, whether they be starving college students or some friends you know that could simply use a night out. Bulldog Burger Company can help you with that. Go again, that's eatwithus.com, a great place to eat, a great place to work. Go check them out today. Bulldog Burger Company, the place where people go to meet. M-E-A-T. All right, let's look at the bowl picture. And, of course, as these get closer, we'll begin to preview these games. But we'll start at the top. The Goodyear Cotton Bowl in Arlington. That's Alabama versus Cincinnati. Alabama should win that game. That said, I won't be the least bit surprised if Cincinnati doesn't hang in. This is their chance. They've had a great year. It's just like they say, like Ric Flair says, to be the man, you got to beat the man. I think Cincinnati has a puncher's chance to keep this game close. I just think against Nick Saban, it is just so difficult. And you're going to give this guy, 25 days to prepare. I like Alabama in the game. I think you guys do too. But this Capital One Orange Bowl in Miami, Georgia versus Michigan, that could be awfully, awfully interesting. Michigan plays a very physical brand of football. They've got SEC caliber athletes too. So, it's not the least bit of a surprise that Michigan made it. I think a lot of people projected Ohio State to make it earlier in the year. I think we all just assumed it'll be another rivalry game where Ohio State beats Michigan. Well, they get over the hump. They take care of the Buckeyes, and now they're in the playoff. A year ago, people were saying Jim Harbaugh should be fired. And now here he is in the playoff. Has his team 2 wins away from a national championship. Pretty crazy to think about. The All-State Sugar Bowl, Ole Miss versus Baylor. It's the second one in this decade for the Rebels. Now, here's the thing. The Sugar Bowl is not what it once was, but it is still a prestigious game. And anybody can say otherwise is just being disingenuous. And maybe it's because we hadn't been. We got a little haterism in our game. You used to crown the SEC champion by winning the Sugar Bowl. Okay, well, that doesn't happen anymore. Okay, that said, I want to go to the Sugar Bowl. We've never been. Ole Miss is getting to go for the second time since 2015. They played a pretty pedestrian Oklahoma State team then. They're going to play the Big 12 champion Baylor Bears this time. And Baylor, listen, with Dave Aranda, who thought in year 2 you'd have Dave Aranda and Baylor playing for a Big 12 championship and now in a New Year's Six Bowl? I didn't see that coming. And it's like I begin to ask myself, I don't know why. The Big 12 has a lot of parity in it. Dave Aranda is a very cerebral coach. It'll be interesting to see what he cooks up defensively against Ole Miss. And one thing I'll share, too, is, Ole Miss should be completely healthy by then. We didn't, even though they beat us, we didn't get them at 100% health. They were still a little bit beat up, not as much as they had been down the stretch because they were able to kind of rest a couple guys late. But they beat us, and they weren't 100%. They will be much closer to 100% when they play Baylor. Dave Aranda will have a defensive scheme to try to slow Matt Corral down. Does he have the athletes that can execute it? That's a real question. I think there's a real good chance Ole Miss wins this ball game. And Matt Corral rides off into the sunset, makes NFL millions, and then we'll see what happens next year, right? But there's no denying that Ole Miss had a great year this year. And you say, hey, we had our chances to beat them. We did. And I go back to that thing, too. I think if you're looking at Ole Miss, the one thing that stands out to me, and I attribute this to coaching. There are a lot of games that you look at and say, you know what, hey, they could have lost, but they didn't. They didn't. The one game you look at and say they lost and they probably should have won, obviously, is Auburn. They only had the 2 losses. The Alabama game wasn't close. The final score is not indicative of Alabama's dominance. It was a 35-0 ball game at one point. But Ole Miss, you can say, well, you know what? They very easily could have lost to Tennessee. They didn't. They very easily could have lost to Arkansas. They didn't. They very easily could have lost to Mississippi State. They didn't. Good teams find a way to win. And to say that Ole Miss is not a good team this year is just not being fair. It's just not being honest. They're a good team, and they have earned the right to be in the Sugar Bowl. I don't think there's any question about that. And they're built to win this year, and they have. They have. Still didn't get to Atlanta, and I know that's still a burr in the saddle, but the reality of it is it's been a good year. The Citrus Bowl, and that's another one that we haven't been to either. Kentucky back in the Citrus. No real surprise. We've talked about that on our bowl projections here on the show. They'll get Iowa. Now, if you watched Iowa against Michigan, it wasn't much of a game. You know, Kirk Ferentz is a guy that's been in Iowa forever and a day. He was mentioned, he used to get mentioned regularly for jobs, but clearly he's happy there in Iowa. You know, Kentucky, January 1 bowl game. You know, Mark Stoops and the guys at Kentucky, you know, they play in the East. You know, so they get the benefit of playing in the East. They're a lot like us. The difference is that because of the fact they play in the East, they almost kind of squeak out one more conference win a year and kind of stay ahead of us in the bowl pecking order. That's another bowl game I want to get to. Maybe next year, right? Maybe next year we can get to the Citrus. All right, so now we get to the SEC Bowl Pool, which is the what they call the group of six. Because, you know, the playoff is the playoff. That's picked by the committee. And then the Florida Citrus Bowl, they pick their team. Outside of that, the SEC kind of sets up the pairings. You know, I've told you guys before, it's like the bowls submit their top three teams, the teams submit their top three bowls, and then the conference works together. Now, I mentioned on the show a week or so ago, does geography play a factor in these bowl games? And it turns out that it did. That's the thing when I look at every bit of this, especially once you get outside of the Florida Bowls, the geography is a huge part of this. I don't think anybody could argue otherwise. Mississippi State, of course, taking on Texas Tech. We'll preview that a lot between now and December 28th. That's going to be a 5:45 game on ESPN. My hope is you'll just go watch it in person. I have no idea what the forecast is going to be. We're 22 days away. But the reality of it is that Bulldogs back in the Liberty Bowl. Not a big surprise to anybody that subscribes to genespage.com or listens to this show. Felt that was going to be the pick for the last week or so. It was Texas or Liberty, and then it really began to trend more towards Liberty when 13 teams became bowl eligible in the SEC. I know there's some people that are disappointed. I would have preferred to go to Texas because, we've never been. I'd love to go to the Texas Bowl, climate-controlled stadium, NFL venue. We got a great alumni base out there. That was my preference. But it makes sense that we go to Liberty. When you begin to rank the bowls, Liberty is the 7th in the pecking order. And you know what we finished in the SEC? 7th. 7th. So we're headed to Liberty, and a chance for Mike Leach to kind of get some revenge against the Red Raiders. You guys know when he left Texas Tech, it was not a very tidy undertaking, to say the least. So a lot of storylines with this one. Texas Tech, not a great team. We'll preview that again later in the bowl season. I like the matchup. I think, the last time we went to Liberty Bowl was 2013. And we had a young quarterback named Dak Prescott that was just really beginning to emerge as a starter. That was a year that was pretty crazy. Tyler Russell was a starter, gets hurt against Oklahoma State, and then Dak starts against Alcorn, I guess was, and Auburn. And then the next thing you know, we're off and running, and then Dak gets hurt. But Dak was 100% healthy, and so that year in the Liberty Bowl against Rice, it was a 44-7 ball game. That was not truly indicative of Mississippi State's dominance. Jamion Lewis sets a Liberty Bowl record for receiving yards. We did whatever we wanted to do in that ball game. But it became a launching point towards the 2014 year. I think we could see a similar situation here. Will Rogers against a Texas Tech defense is pretty leaky. You go out there, let's say you could put up some huge numbers. Not just Will Rogers, but the Bulldog offense. Let's say you win impressively. Well, that's the last memory that people have of Mississippi State. And you say, they finished 8-5 last year. They played pretty well down the stretch, and then they destroyed Texas Tech in the bowl game. Kind of sets you up next year. preseason top 25 maybe. We got everybody coming back. That's the thing people fail to realize. Expecting Martin Emerson and Charles Cross to go pro. But outside of that, we got everybody else coming back. And of course, it's difficult to replace a true cover corner and a NFL left tackle prospect for sure. But winning this bowl game is very important. It's not just, okay, we wanted to make a bowl game. And again, I go back to our projections beginning of the year. Steve, what kind of years are going to be? Well, I think 7-5 is the over/under, with the ceiling being 8-4, the floor being 6-6, and we're probably a solid bowl team that ends up somewhere in Tennessee. Well, that's exactly what happened. It didn't happen the way we expected, but that's what happened. So now let's go win the bowl game, and then all of a sudden you set yourself up next year possibly playing in the Florida Citrus, or perhaps a New Year's Six bowl game next year. I don't think there's any question. This is a team certainly capable of doing that. The Duke's Mayo Bowl, the former Belk Bowl, that's South Carolina versus North Carolina. That's a pretty sexy matchup, to be quite honest with you. Both of those teams, South Carolina probably overachieved, UNC underachieved. There were some people after a couple weeks in the season thought North Carolina might challenge for the playoffs. And then what do you know, they get beat early on and all that's over with. But this will be a ticket bonanza for the folks in Charlotte. North Carolina and South Carolina don't play very often, which is kind of a shame, really. I mean, it really is. You would think teams that close together, you could sell some tickets. It's difficult, too, sometimes with all of the, scheduling restrictions these days. You got to play a Power 5 as a non-conference. And so how many of those do you get together? Well, North Carolina and South Carolina are probably not going to play every year. It's not going to, Clemson's already got to play South Carolina. South Carolina's not going to pick up another ACC team. The last time these two teams played was back in 2019, also in Charlotte. Back in 15, also in Charlotte. So they have had a chance to meet a couple times here as of late. North Carolina, of course, wins back in 19, 24-20. The Tar Heels have pretty much dominated the series over the years, 35-19-4. But South Carolina, down the stretch, they've won 3 of the last 4 within the series, and I believe about 7 of the last 9. So it'll be interesting. And Shane Beamer and those guys probably feel like they're playing with house money. They'll come out loose and ready to go. And they've had a ton of quarterback trouble this year, probably have somebody healthy, you would think then. Let's see here, the Music City Bowl. Tennessee versus Purdue. To me, it's kind of a boring matchup. But again, probably a bit of a ticket bonanza for the folks in Nashville. Nashville is a great southern city. If you haven't been to Nashville recently, you're missing out. A lot to do there. Great city. It is my favorite SEC city. Tennessee will bring a lot of people to this ball game. They absolutely will. It may be their last ball game for a couple years. And it's crazy how quiet that's all been. Jeremy Pruitt leaves, and there's all this talk about there were staffers involved with the recruiting violations. And, of course, those are allegations at this point. They're not facts of finding. But we'll see. But they'll turn out. They'll go to this ball game. It'll be a sea of orange. There'll be a few Boilermaker fans there. But, Tennessee in the Music City Bowl makes a lot of good sense, considering a 7-5 type team. And people were wondering, well, Steve, do we have a chance to get in there? Well, let's be honest. If you're the Music City Bowl and you're ranking your top 3 teams, you're going to have Tennessee number 1. It's a home state bowl game. People can come. And Tennessee's got a bigger fan base, and you got Tennessee and Mississippi State with the same record. It makes perfect sense to me. The Gator Bowl, the Tag Slayer Gator.
Hello, Discover here to explain our cash back match. Here's how it works. We give you cash back for using your Discover card on the things you were going to buy anyway. Then we match that cash back in your first year. And that's why we call it Cashback Match. Now to recap and say cashback one more time. We match all the cash back you've earned at the end of your first year automatically. Discover. Exceptionally common sense. Learn more at discover.com/match. Limitations apply.
Hear that? Is that America cheering or a sausage patty sizzling to perfection? It's time to cheer for Egg McMuffin and fresh cracked eggs at McDonald's. It's time to wake up to the aroma of freshly baked biscuits and treat yourself to a real honest-to-goodness morning meal. Breakfast, it's on at McDonald's. Now get any breakfast sandwich for just $2. Available only through the app. Mobile order and pay available at participating McDonald's. McD app download and registration required.
Bowl. A&M versus Wake Forest. I don't think that matchup is going to get enough notoriety. I think that is going to be a really good game. Wake up and down a little bit this year, mostly up. Lost some ball games they probably shouldn't. But you look at the A&M thing, and we're going to talk about this on Wednesday's show as we kind of review the SEC season and kind of look who achieved and who underachieved and who overachieved. A&M finishes 5th in the West in the year they beat Alabama. Let that sink in for a second. I mean, you finally get over the hump, and you finally beat Nick Saban in Alabama, and you finish 5th in the SEC West. Doesn't make a lot of sense. And you get swept by the Mississippi schools the same year you beat Alabama. And this is a team, too. You'd say, well, they had to put Zach Calzada in there. They did lose their starting quarterback against Colorado. But you've got an NFL back in C.J. Spillers, and you've got a lot of offensive skill, and you had an offensive line that took some time to get settled, but you had one of the better defenses in the conference, and you turn in an 8-4 year. So I don't know how many people are going to be motivated to go to the Gator Bowl if you're A&M. Of course, they've got a huge fan base, so we'll see. It's a Florida Bowl game. But I think this matchup could be rather interesting. Arkansas versus Penn State in the Outback Bowl, I think this might be the best matchup of the Group of 6 bowls. Arkansas versus Penn State in the Outback Bowl, I love it. I think it's going to be a very physical game, probably, kind of a Big Ten type game. The thing may be over with in about an hour and a half. Penn State wants to line it up and run it. Arkansas lines up and runs it. And they'll be healthy, too. That's the one thing about the bowl season. There is going to be a little bit of rust, I guess, for everybody involved because it's been a while since you played a ball game. But Arkansas will be healthy, or should be, against Penn State. I really like the matchup. I think this will be a very entertaining game. And that's one good thing about us playing December 28th, right, is we get to sit at home on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day and watch a ton of great football. And I'm excited about watching this ball. I like Sam Pittman. It's hard. How do you not like Sam Pittman? It's a great story. And he's a great guy. And just covering him, in the pregame and stuff and the game's preseason. Goodness, the pregame press conferences leading up to the Arkansas-Mississippi State game, I don't say that he spoke really glowingly about Mississippi State, but I thought he was very honest and genuine. And then even in the postgame when they beat us, he goes, hey, we treated it like our Super Bowl. I can't knock it, man. They knew how important it was to get bowl eligible, and they ended up having a really good year. Now, I think this is a team, too, that's going to lose a lot. One of the more veteran teams in the conference. Arkansas, Ole Miss, and Kentucky. A lot of experience on those teams. They will lose a lot. A lot of COVID seniors came back. Will be awfully interesting. But I do like the matchup. I think you guys will too. The Texas Bowl, a lot of people expect us to go there. I told you guys, again, that was my preference. That's January 4th, 8 p.m. Central. LSU versus Kansas State. I'll be honest with you, I think this is a bit of a snoozer. But by this point, we'll be happy to have watched it, right? We'll be happy to have some college football to watch. It's a Tuesday night, LSU versus Kansas State. Will be an awful lot of fun, but I think it's kind of a boring matchup. And some people would say, well, Steve, we really should have been in Texas Bowl. I hear you. I do. But I don't know that we would have sold 2,500 tickets. LSU will sell a ton. LSU's got a ton of Tigers out there in Houston, and they'll see it as a chance to skip work, man. It's like, oh, I got to go to the ball game. Okay, well, here's your excuse. They'll be gone Tuesday or Wednesday and come back and have a short work week and be right back to partying, man. So Texas Bowl, LSU versus Kansas State, I don't think it's a good matchup. I think LSU athletically is far superior. And I think these guys, too, are just kind of playing for each other. It's like Ed Orgeron is gone. You win the last ball game at home. You send Ed out a winner. And then you got a chance to cap your season with a winning record. Would be awfully interesting if LSU lost this ball game. We'll see what happens. A lot of discussion about Joe Brady possibly coming back to Baton Rouge as an offensive coordinator. The final 3 bowl games, and if you guys, again, if you're fans of this show, you're not surprised the Armed Forces Bowl was a 1-year agreement for the SEC. to make sure we get all of our teams in a bowl game. But it's a somewhat regional, so we don't have somebody going out to Palo Alto or something to play in the Playpen Bowl or something like that. But, we had a good experience out there last year. I mean, I don't know how many of you made the trip. Dallas-Fort Worth's a great area, obviously. But the Armed Forces Bowl, outside of the weather, I thought it was pretty cool. So you get Missouri versus Army. That's a tough matchup. I mean, it really is, because Army will cut block you to death and just run it down your throat. But, Mizzou gets in. Eli Drinkwitz and those guys, you remember last year, everybody in the SEC got a bowl bid. Missouri had to back out of theirs due to COVID. So the first one of the Eli Drinkwitz era there in Como. Be interesting. Just on first blush, I like Army in the game because that Missouri defense is so leaky. The Gasparilla Bowl, Florida versus Central Florida. Should be fun. They ought to sell a bunch of tickets, right? It's right there in Tampa. Tampa's a great city. We've been down there a couple times here in recent years. We went down to St. Pete back in 2016, and of course back to Tampa in 2018. It's a good time. It was a little warm down there too. But the Gasparilla Bowl now no longer the St. Pete Bowl, no longer at Tropicana Fieldhouse. I believe it's at Raymond James Stadium these days. But Florida versus UCF, that'll be interesting. If you remember Florida and UCF, there was a lot of dispute about playing head-to-head and about who didn't want to play and who did, and there was some athletic director saber-rattling that went on with that. So this will be interesting. I suspect UCF will probably be up to play in this bowl game. So that's the Gasparilla Bowl. And then the Birmingham Bowl, Auburn versus Houston. It makes a lot of sense. Auburn will probably feel like a home game. They'll turn out and go. They still like Brian Harsin. It's been a disappointing end of the year. You lose 4 straight, but you played Alabama so tough. I think a lot of people feel like, hey, maybe we're okay. Maybe we're okay. Of course, they've made some coaching changes and things along those lines. But, the reality of it is this is a tough matchup for Auburn. I mean, it really is. You can say, well, Steve, athletically, it's probably going to favor Auburn. Well, that may be true. But, winning and belief are difficult things to defeat. And that's the thing. You look, Houston lost to Cincinnati, an undefeated playoff team in the conference championship game. That's how it went down. And, they're going to see this. I don't think they're going to pout. I mean, Houston wasn't going to be in the playoff. Sure, they would have loved to have won the conference title game, but they weren't going to be in the playoff. They finished the year 11-2. And I'm going to just kind of give you an idea. So Houston loses to Texas Tech in Houston to open the year. Then they blow out Rice and Grambling, as they should. They beat Navy, blow out Tulsa, blow out Tulane. They eked by ECU in overtime. They beat SMU, who was ranked 19th in the country at the time. They beat South Florida. They blow out Temple. They beat Memphis. They blow out UConn. And then they lose to Cincinnati. So they hadn't really played a lot of teams that you look at. Even the teams they played out of conference, nobody really kind of moves the radar. But this is one of those program-defining type games. This is a helmet sticker type win for Houston if they can go find a way to beat Auburn. And, of course, Auburn's going to be playing with a backup quarterback. TJ Finley will still be the guy. But that's the thing is he'll get all the first-team reps here over these 15 bowl practices, and we'll see how it breaks loose. But I think that could be a sneaky good game. That'll be December 28th. That's the 11 a.m. kick. That's the same day as our game. So if you're already in Memphis, maybe sit around and watch that one and tailgate a little bit. So, again, so that's your SEC Bowl tie-ins, 13 bowl games. I think that every SEC team is favored. If memory serves me correct, I looked at some lines earlier. It looks like that every SEC team is favored in the bowl game. I don't think it's going to be the dominant bowl season that a lot of people expect, though. And we'll do some deep dives into these matchups a little bit later in the bowl season. But I could see this thing breaking down to being about 500, to be honest with you. Is Mississippi State capable of beating Texas Tech? Yeah, we are. We should win that game. I think the line's 8.5. And they're always the self-loathing Mississippi State fan. It's like, well, we play better as the underdogs. There's no evidence to support any of that. The reality of it is more times than not we are the underdogs. But, whatever. But, I could see Kansas State beating LSU. I could see Central Florida beating Florida. I expect Army to beat Missouri. Houston could beat Auburn. You certainly, Mac Brown wouldn't get his guys up to play in Charlotte. That's a good game. So that's the bowl picture. And again, we'll break it down as we get going. And a reminder, too, as we get back to we talked about geography. When you get into the group of 6 in the lower bowls, when you get out of the Florida bowl games, right? We got the playoff matchup set. We got the Citrus Bowl set. We get the Florida games settled. And then the lower bowls, which is we're one of them, the lower bowls all follow the geographic chalk, right? Bulldogs head to Memphis. South Carolina heads to Charlotte. Tennessee heads to Nashville. LSU heads to Houston. Missouri heads to Fort Worth. Then they're just kind of the last team standing. Florida heads to Tampa, and Auburn heads to Birmingham. It all makes perfect sense in hindsight. And we talked about that possibility when the 13 teams get bowl eligible. Would geography play a factor with all the COVID stuff around the country? And it's not the factor that it once was, but people are still relatively COVID cautious and all that stuff. And so, hey, we're going to stay in our home state, and we're going to be closer to home. And at the end of the day, you and I both know it's about selling tickets. These bowl games work all year long for one day. That's what they do. They work for the bowl game for one day, generate TV revenue, and to sell tickets. Well, what's going to help sell tickets is make it an easier trip for the fans of the Southeastern Conference teams. This is an SEC Bowl tie-in, and so, hey, we want to make it easy for our fans to get to the games. Make perfect sense. And you see, at the end of the day, it's an exhibition game. And one of the final thoughts about the bowls before we move on to today's top 10 list. Every year we have this talk, well, there's too many bowls. There are not too many bowls. There are not too many bowls. This is my personal opinion. You can say, well, Steve, it should only be 10 or 20. So if you don't know Mississippi State's bowl history, then shame on you. But there were many years that Mississippi State would have been a good bowl team. But because of the fact there was this misconception that we didn't travel well or we wouldn't travel, we were all just a bunch of farmers that drove tractors and combines and couldn't get out of town. We didn't get the backing of the state legislature like Ole Miss did. Back and that's not to take anything away from Ole Miss. But Ole Miss was a better bowl team because Ole Miss could guarantee ticket sales. They could. We didn't get the same backing because just about everybody in the Mississippi State legislature back in the, in the 50s and 60s were Ole Miss educated folks. And so they would make sure tickets got sold. They would guarantee the tickets would be sold, that they would sell their allotment. So they got to go. We didn't get that courtesy. And so we didn't always get to go to bowl games. And so now we get to go, and sometimes it's not the bowl game that we want to be, but you know what? We've been 12 straight years. And then somebody shared the 2013 highlights of Liberty Bowl on Gene's page. And so I went and watched them. It was kind of Dak's coming out party in many respects. It was kind of like that teaser for what could come next. And it was like, for the first time in school history, Mississippi State makes 4 straight bowl games. They set a new record for 4 straight bowl games. Well, now 8 years later, this is our 12th consecutive bowl game. And then there's always that guy. Well, last year we had Leland's record. Well, okay. And we still went to the bowl game, and we won it. How about that? How about them apples? We won it. Wasn't a great year last year for us. It was a better year this year. Next year, I think, is going to be even better. But I love college football. I know you guys do too. And because of the fact that we stay so focused on our own team and our own conference, we don't always get to watch a lot of teams, right? So bowl season gives us a chance to watch a ton of football. Man, if I would line up and watch all these games. I mean, we used to have the Popeyes Bahamas Bowl. I watched all that stuff. And there's one stretch there you go where you get a bowl game pretty much every single night. We get college football every night. Why are we so against fun? I love fun. I love football. College football is fun. And you can say, well, why are we rewarding mediocrity? Guys, it's a sport. It's a sport. It's entertainment. I like to be entertained. I like to be able to come home during December. Maybe we have a media opportunity with Mike Leach, and I can come home and type up my story and then sit down and, watch a couple teams that I hadn't watched all year line up and play. It's a great thing. There's not too many bowl games. I'm not saying we need to add more, but there's enough bowl games. I like college football, and I always get a little bit sad this time of year because I know it's ending. Now, I can't even begin to imagine these teams that don't enjoy college baseball. I mean, honestly. Valentine's Day weekend, we're going to be getting ready to defend a national championship for the first time in school history. And so I'm excited about that. But I get a little sad when college football is over because, it ends in January, and then, we don't really have any meaningful football again until we get into spring practice. And then, again, that's all a precursor to the season. So, no, there are not too many bowl games. And here's what I would suggest. If you think there are too many bowl games, then guess what? Don't watch them, because I'm going to. Today's Top 10 list brought to you by closewithblair.com. That's close, C-L-O-S-E, closewithblair.com. Blair is in the mortgage industry. A lot of people don't know the ins and outs of that process. It can be quite intimidating. So go with the winner. Go with Blair Chandler. Blair is a bulldog, a guy that has a place here, season ticket holder, multiple sports. We believe in doing business with bulldogs whenever we can. Blair certainly is. 21 years of experience in the mortgage lending profession, top 1% close ratio nationally. Not just in Pisgah, not in Bug Tussle, not in Dumas, everywhere. Everywhere. Blair can get your loan closed. You know what? If he can't, he can get you on a plan to ensure that you get yourself into a situation where you can have the dream of home ownership come true for yourself. Interest rates are low. Now is a good time to refi. Maybe perhaps you got a little overextended during the quarantine, ran up some credit card debt with all that online shopping, right? Maybe consolidate that debt and have your equity working for you, because the interest on your mortgage is tax deductible. The interest on your credit card is not. Let Blair put some solutions together for you today. Visit him at closewithblair.com. He can walk you through the process. And by being a loyal Boneyard listener, we're going to give you a little insight here. If you reach out to Blair and you mention to him, hey, listen, Steve talked about you on the Boneyard, he's going to pay for your appraisal. That's a $500 to $600 value. Pretty simple, right? Just by being a listener to this show, we can help you get into a mortgage or a refi or a second mortgage or maybe even a home equity line of credit a little more affordably. That's what we do here because we're family. Give Blair a call or text today. I'm going to give you his personal cell number. Not his office phone, his personal number. 601-500-2344, 601-500-2344. Blair actually licensed in multiple states too, so you don't just have to be a home stater. Blair Chandler, closewithblair.com. Really excited about today's list. One of my favorite bands. And there so often I get one of you younger guys that say, Steve, the 80s are over. Yeah, it's true. It's true. I don't need the calendar. I know. I can look in the mirror and see all these wrinkles and realize that the 80s are over. But I love modern rock too. And the band we're about to talk about, I kind of teased this on the show Friday. When we did our top 10 list of bands with numbers in their name, we talked about 10 years. 10 years out of Knoxville, Tennessee. I have seen them probably half a dozen times or so. I have met these guys. I have followed their journey since the very beginning. I love 10 years. Jesse, one of the best vocalists in the game today. It's true. One of the best songwriters. I don't think they get enough credit. Everybody loves what they love and think, you're wrong if you don't know these guys. Let me tell you what. I am giving you a gift today of 10 years. And this was one of the more difficult lists I've had to ever put together. I told Ani this morning I could have done a top 20 and still probably not felt good about it. But I feel really good about this list. And I had to give you a handful of honorable mentions too, because I got some other friends and family that love 10 years who would say, I can't believe you didn't mention this one. So honorable mentions: Riding on the Walls, 11 a.m., Daydreamer, Don't Fight It, Shoot It Out, Actions and Motives. Ani says that I took an L by not putting Shoot It Out and Dancing with the Dead in the top 10. Well, I didn't. So he can put his own list together. His list would be wrong. My list would be correct. So here we go. My 10 years list. Now, here's one of the cool things, too. I got every album represented with the exception of the first one, which was the EP. And I actually have this is tattooed on my right wrist above my Highway 98 tattoo. It is the 10 Years Bird from the initial album, Killing All That Holds You. That's a good album too. Difficult to get, but a good album too. Okay, so here you go. Every album in the catalog is represented on this list, which is kind of rare, but it kind of shows the depth of this band, that they don't really have any bad albums. Now, we'll start with a song from an album called From Birth to Burial. And when this album concluded, Jesse said he considered disbanding the band. They'd had a lot of difficulty. Tater, the guy that was the lead guitar player, left the band, had some addiction issues, and really got into religion and kind of gave up on touring as a musician for a long time. And then out of the blue, some original members came back, and they found their juice. And so the From Birth to Burial album, to me, is a little disjointed. I thought it was very dark. I thought and sometimes it was kind of contrived. To me, it is not truly indicative of 10 years. Some high moments on the album, but I think by and large, it is probably the weakest of the albums. I think they were kind of reborn after this album, which is kind of ironic. But the song I went with, number 10, is Miscellanea. Miscellanea. It's about a woman. It's about an older woman. It's a pretty interesting track. And Jesse told me there was actually an alternate title for this, but they think it was a little bit PG-13, so they didn't put it on the album because they thought the record company wouldn't agree. It'd be difficult to get it on the radio, too. Number 9, going back to the album Minus the Machines, which is kind of a stripped-down album. It's not truly unplugged, even though they have a couple of great unplugged albums out there that are live and available on iTunes. This is from Minus the Machine, and I really, really dig this album. It didn't sell as well as some of the other ones did, because not everybody likes, like the Jar of Flies album from Alice in Chains. It didn't sell as well as Facelift and Dirt, but for those of us that love Alice in Chains, we really dug it. This is kind of in that same vein. Minus the Machines is a little more, stripped down, but the song is Backlash. Backlash. Great tune, very aggressive in many respects. I think that album is one of those albums when I'm traveling, sometimes I put on when it's a long trip and I just need to chill a little bit. Number 8, one of the better up-tempo songs in the catalog, actually off the newest album, Violent Allies. It was the first single off the album. I absolutely love it. Love it. I love the kind of the industrial bass line on this one. It's called The Shift. The Shift. It's a rocker now. I'm going to tell you now. Listen, this isn't Slayer that we're talking about either. Okay, this isn't, they're not going to sit there and yell at you. Jesse can really sing, but this is a really, really aggressive song for them. Number 7, I had a chance. I'd heard this song, but I went to Lafayette, Louisiana, actually on the outskirts. I guess it was in Scott, Louisiana, but I went to a club out there and saw an acoustic show with 10 Years. It was an incredible tour for them. They were kind of dialing it back a little bit, not bringing the big amplifiers out there. They just kind of sat around and played some of their better tracks acoustically. And this was the highlight of the night, without question. And it's a song off of Division, which is one of my favorite albums from them. But it's the song So Long Goodbye. This is one of those gut-wrenching type songs that if you have ever loved anybody in your life, and you listen to this song, you will be reminded of them. Number 6, this is another one. This is the lead track from How to Live as Ghost. This was kind of the comeback for them in many respects. I thought this is when they really kind of got their groove back. And it's a song called Novocaine. Jesse's vocal is incredible. The harmonies on the chorus are incredible. This is another one that's kind of in your face. Number 5, this goes back to, this is the title track. So this is, this was on the show last week, It's Now Is the Time. And I misspoke, it was actually the lead single off the Feeding the Wolves album. Feeding the Wolves, Now Is the Time. And it's got a sneaky bass line in the chorus. Like when you're riding down the road, you'll think maybe you hit something. No, you didn't. When they drop into the chorus, it's kind of like, almost like using an 808 or something. There's like this bass kick when they get into the chorus. I absolutely love it. Now Is the Time is a very inspirational song. It's not necessarily about recovery, even though there is a lot of addiction and recovery type language in some of the 10-year songs. But this is basically about, you know what, hey, this is it. This is where we're going to make our stand. We're going to make a change in life. We've had enough. Now is the time. Number 4, this is one of the most beautiful songs that the band has ever recorded. It is on the new album, Violent Allies. And when I first heard this, the very first time, when the album dropped and I put it on, I couldn't wait. And I probably listened to this song 10 times in a row to the point that I got emotional. It is an incredible song. It is a beautiful, beautiful song. And it builds. It's not just a ballad. It starts with the piano and Jesse's voice. And next thing you know, we're off on the ride, man. But it's a song called The Unknown. And it's one of those inspirational. I get chills talking about this song. Basically, it's like, I'm going to live my life wide open. And I'm going to embrace what is to come. I'm not going to be safe. I'm not just going to sit at home and pay bills and just wait to die. I'm going to embrace the fact that there's so much beauty and glory in life, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to run headlong into the unknown, whether it be the ending of a relationship or the ending of whatever, some professional type endeavor. I'm just going to embrace the rest of my life and make the rest of my life the best of my life. I absolutely love the song. It's one of those songs, too. If you don't listen to any song on this list, you say, Steve, I don't really listen to top 10 lists. Okay, I get it. A bunch of you do. But if you don't listen to any other song, listen to this one. Number 3, this is a great tune. This is kind of a breakthrough song for them off of the Division album. They had a couple of hits off of the Autumn Effect, but Division is what really put them on the radio consistently. And this song is one of those. Basically, Jesse ends up dating this girl. It's kind of a model or whatever, but it's called Beautiful. And, the hook in this one is as beautiful as you are. It's so pitiful what you are. You go and listen to it. It's a great tune. And it's one of those things, too, that many of us have probably experienced that. It's like, you have this person you pursue or whatever, and you think, man, if I could just have her or him, everything would be great. And then it's like, be careful what you wish for. It's like you get them and you find out how hollow they are or whatever. And so it's... The song is beautiful, but it's really about some of the ugliness in life. Number 2, the one that started it all for them, and there is a bit of a story about this. I've shared some of this with you guys on the show before. And I think we've actually had this song on the show, on one of our top 10 lists. Roy would have to confirm that with me. But so Jesse, being from Knoxville, Tennessee, his cousin was a young guy named Brad Renfro, who was a child actor that was very, very successful. And you say, well, Steve, who is Brad Renfro? Well, you remember watching The Client, the movie The Client with Susan Sarandon? Well, he was Jesse Sway. He was the client. He was the kid. And that was 11 years of age. 11 years. And he gets that major role in a John Grisham film. It's a phenomenal movie. Well, Brad really struggled after that. He went on, but he was in, several movies and films and never really found the success I think a lot of people expected. And what's really a sad story is Brad basically went into an audition just kind of on chance. He lived in a trailer park with his grandmother. A lot of addiction in his family. And to make a long story short, he died. Heroin overdose at 25 years of age. And it ripped Jesse's heart out. And he wrote this song, Wasteland, which is your number 2 song. And one of the key lines in it is, has self-inflicted his perdition. That's when Jesse was a little more cryptic with some of the lyrics he wrote and things like that. But Wasteland is a song about addiction. And I think it's one of those things that people look at and maybe don't fully appreciate the language in it. It is a phenomenal rock song, but it is also a tribute to Brad Renfro. But number 1 for me, without a doubt, and this is one of those songs too that I listened to this song a lot. Even I put it on a couple days ago. I mean, it's pretty. It gets played a lot out of my phone, But it's the song "Fix Me." And it's like I've got a lot of people around me that think they know my life. And it's like, oh, there's this and there's that, and he's under so much pressure. And I don't even feel that stuff. To them, they do. They look at it and say, oh, I had an Ole Miss guy a while back, and it's somebody that I actually consider a bit of a friend. I've got an Ole Miss guy that messages me every now and again. We talk some shop about, coaching changes and things like that. And it's never really been an adversarial type relationship. I won't tell you who he is because I want to out him. I want to maintain the dialogue. But he was like, Steve, he said, I'm sorry you've had so much pain in your life. Well, I don't know any other way to live. I didn't ask for any of that stuff. And say, well, Steve, you had that, Yeah, I made some bad decisions, but at the same time, too, there have been a lot of things that happened in my life that were very negative that I had no say in. It's just life on life's terms. I didn't choose a lot of that stuff, but I don't let it define me. And so in many ways, this song is kind of a theme song for me. It's like, I'm right where I need to be. Don't try and fix me. I'm fine in the fire. I feed on the friction. I'm exactly where I want to be. And so that's the one for me. It's Fix Me. And I agonized over this list because I knew for many of you this is your introduction to 10 years, and I didn't want to screw it up. And I don't believe that I did. I think I absolutely nailed this one. And I think you guys will love this. Roy had never heard of this band, and he's like, dude, I really like them. You will too. If you like rock music at all, you're going to love this band. They're not too heavy. They're not too soft. They're a great band, great writing, great vocals. I just don't know if I could recommend these guys high enough. I just don't know that I could. So check them out today. If you have ideas for the top 10 list, reach out and let me know. We're going to do some more modern rock this week as we kind of run through this thing. Excited about what is to come. And excited to go see 10 years again very soon. And right now, Jesse actually is suffering with COVID. So best of luck to Jesse and all the crew with 10 years as they kind of recover from all of that. All right, now it's time for the next segment of the show, brought to you by Campus Bookmart. Standing man, Miss Kathy Brown, lovely, talented Susie, everybody up there will treat you like family because in their mind you are family. It's great to go to a place where everybody knows your name. That's pretty much the case at Campus Bookmart. Whether they know you or not, they'll treat you like they would. The latest and greatest in Mississippi State merch available at that great location right here in Stark Vegas. And if you can't make it to town, let me encourage you to find them on the World Wide Web at campusbookmart.net. And by being a loyal Boneyard listener, we'll give you a phrase that pays. Very simple, BSR. That stands for Beautiful Steve Robertson. And that'll get you free shipping on all orders over $50. Any order less than $50, absolutely incomplete. Let me encourage you, Mom. I know you're doing most of the shopping. You got 19 days left till Christmas. Only 18 of them are shopping days. And a lot of that is going to creep up on you before you know it. Save yourself some time and effort. Shop online today at campusbookmart.net. You'll be glad you did. By using that promo code BSR, we'll save you shipping on all orders over $50. And you order less than $50, absolutely incomplete. And while you're asking, they've got full stock of all 4 of the books that have been released. So if you're looking to add some books, you can do that too, right there at campusbookmart.net. All right, let's take a look at the recruiting weekend it was. Rather interesting weekend in many respects. Paul Jones and I have spoken to just about all of the visitors. A couple more we'll track down today. I'll speak to Trent Ramsey, offensive line prospect out of Tampa, Florida this afternoon. Pretty excited about that. Pretty interesting story with him. It's a very long, athletic offensive line prospect. And a couple of guys out there, obviously, that we're still tracking. Now, one of the first things that happens, the recruiting has changed a good bit, with this early signing period, and people are like, oh, we had to visit, nobody committed. Well, here's the deal with that. There's just so much of that. This close to signing day, guys will commit privately and then announce publicly on signing day. That's just kind of how it all works. And so I think it's important to understand that that's not necessarily a negative thing. You just don't have the big recruiting weekend that leads to a ton of commitments like we used to have. It just doesn't happen that way anymore. And so there were some guys that we expected to come in, have a good time, and then announce closer to signing day. Mike Leach will be on the road this week doing in-home visits. As you guys are aware, he was not part of the Liberty Bowl presser because he was conducting some in-home visits. And so just be patient with all that. We still feel good about where things stand, but let's recap, some of these visitors. We kind of previewed the weekend here a couple days ago, kind of looked, hey, this is kind of where we are, and what we expect to happen, who's going to be here, who's not. We did have one big surprise, of course, with Jaheim Otis not making it to town. He had set this visit with Mississippi State several weeks ago. So it is a very unpleasant development and a big surprise, to be honest with you. And so, you give Ole Miss a little tip of the cap there, as much as you don't like it. I admire their ability to get things done. And it was a huge, huge surprise. Got a phone call yesterday morning that he wasn't coming, that he may not go anywhere. And then ultimately we find out that he was allegedly headed to Oxford. I haven't confirmed that. That'll be up to the Ole Miss media, confirmed that he actually made it to campus. Talked to a few people yesterday evening just to kind of get the lay of the land. And one of the things that I'll remind you guys of, there are a lot of people that I guess we have this revisionist history when it comes to, to recruiting. It's like sometimes we forget. The last 2 weeks of recruiting, very, very difficult. Very difficult. And it takes a big toll on the fan base because just when you think you've got it all figured out, things change. Kind of how it happens. And that's what happened yesterday. It's all a chess match. This is big boy recruiting. We always talk about, we have to upgrade our talent level. And then we get upset when things are kind of up and down, chasing the next level of talent. You don't get the big fish in the boat easily. That's just how it works. You got to get out there and work hard. And there's always going to be ups and downs. I remember a few years back, some of you may have forgotten this, Chris Jones snuck off and took another unofficial visit to Ole Miss. And all of a sudden there was all this Ole Miss confidence. So Chris Jones initially lied to me and said he didn't go up there. Well, then later on, people were having these pictures online and stuff, and there's Chris. And so I called him back. I'm like, hey, Chris, you can go to school wherever you want, but at least be honest with me, And so Chris told me then, he goes, hey, let me just tell you this. I'm just trying to survive all this. I'm doing the best I can. And so if you don't hear it from me, then don't believe anything that's reported. And so Chris kind of played both sides against the middle and ultimately signed with Mississippi State, as you guys are aware, and put together a great career. And he's having a great career in Kansas City. But that's part of the deal, right? You guys may not remember this either. Caleb Ewells was committed to Mississippi State for a long time and was on the road to Alabama for an official visit. And David Turner, who was actually leaving Mississippi State, I believe to go to Kentucky, if memory serves me correct. One of the last things he does, he gets on the phone and he calls Caleb Ewells and says, hey, Caleb, you don't need to go over there. Mississippi State is home for you. And what happened is Caleb Ewells and the family turned around and came home. That's how it happens. You got good guys like Dave Turner that understand recruiting, but also, too, care about what happens with these young people. It doesn't always work out that way. You always have some people out there that, once they've moved on, they don't really care. They don't really care about the kids. And that's not the case with Dave Turner. But there's always some trepidation and anxiety late. If you remember, Mississippi Alabama All-Star Week is this week. And if you remember, a couple of years ago, we had the coaching changes and everybody was all, worried about what's going to happen. And so Ole Miss people are saying that Emmanuel Forbes is going to flip to them. That he was going to leave Mississippi Alabama All-Star game, and then go up there and spend a day and a half with the Ole Miss folks and then ultimately flip to them on signing day. Didn't happen. They were also trying to get Armandus Cooley to take a visit. Now, he hadn't done much here at Mississippi State, but I just say these things because things aren't always as they appear or they're reported to be. And there are a lot of people out here at this time of year that are kind of dishonest and disingenuous in what they say. And that's just people in the media. No, I'm joking. My point is that a lot of these people never expected to be in this position having to make as difficult a decision. I remember when Robert Elliott out of Oklahoma High School, I remember speaking to his mom on signing day. I went to the press conference, and she said, we thought it would be, okay, all these schools offer us, and then Robert picks his school, and that's the end of it. Well, little did she know, that there were so many people involved in this process, it would make things awfully interesting. She had two people. We have identified them long ago. that showed up at Bridget Elliott's house, claimed to be reporters from the Tupelo Daily Journal. And guys, we hadn't done the cold call knock thing at somebody's house in recruiting journalism in my career. You've never just showed up at somebody's house and knocked on the door getting an interview. Everybody has phones. Everybody has cell phones. Of course, this was during the dead period. It turned out these were a couple of Ole Miss donors trying to find out where Robert was. Robert, of course, was staying with his mother in Houston, Mississippi, kind of out of harm's way because he had planned to sign with Mississippi State. And apparently that was too much for people to take. So there is always some drama late. I've shared with you guys on this show for the better part of 3 or 4 weeks. We're not going to get everybody we want. There are going to be some surprises. That's the way it's always been. State and Ole Miss share a state. We're going to get some. They're going to get some. It's always been that way. It always will be that way. There's always somebody out there conspiring and conniving against you. It's just how life works. That's recruiting. I have had so many coaches that come here and say, well, I know about hard recruiting. And then they leave here and they say, you know what, I've never seen anything like this, ever. And some of your coaches are kind of beginning to say, you know what, I've never seen anything quite like this. There is just an intensity with Mississippi recruiting that is really unlike anything else in the Southeast. I have some friends that cover the Pac-12, and they say, man, I would love to have this much interest in our work as you guys do at State and Ole Miss, because everybody's just hanging on every report. Like you just wait for one site to interview a guy or to share some kind of recruiting nugget or something. And then it's like everybody's like, oh, well, this looks like this is going to happen. Oh, my gosh, it looks like Ole Miss is leading for Stone Blunt. Now it's Mississippi State. As some people who love me have said, that recruiting in many respects is like a soap opera. It's a soap opera for college football fans. You just never know from one day to the next. I shared some text messages with Chris Brooks this morning, trying to run down a picture for an article I'm writing this afternoon. And I said, hey, man, welcome to the final 10 days. You never have back-to-back good days covering recruiting the final 2 weeks of the process. I don't care if you're covering Alabama or LSU or Florida or Ohio State, Notre Dame, Mississippi State, Pearl River Community College. You never have back-to-back good days. And that's one of the reasons that we all love it, is because you never truly know what's going to happen. It's one of those things, too. It's just like the Jaheim Otis thing. Guys from my hometown. Most of you guys didn't even know State was still in the mix with that kid, other than the fact that some people in his family have shared that information with me. And so I have been hesitant to say that I think Mississippi State is going to get him. I do think last week Mississippi State was probably in the best position they have been with him, and then out of the blue he goes to Ole Miss. It's crazy. It is. And it makes you second-guess things. Like you begin to think, okay, then how did I miss this? What can I learn from this? And the truth of the matter is no matter how analytical you are about it, a lot of things just don't make sense. There's always sometimes, too, that are people like they tell you what they think is going to happen or what they hope is going to happen, and you got to navigate through that. That's the danger of speaking to one person. And so there are a lot of people involved in this situation with Jaheim Otis. Got a lot of people that are advising him, say, this is what you should do, this is what you shouldn't do. And you know what? He may end up going to Alabama. He may show up in Mississippi State this weekend. He might end up signing with Ole Miss, which I'll be honest with you, it seemed completely out of the realm of possibility a month ago. I know that Ole Miss has worked hard to get into the mix with him because they have not been in a good position with him. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he cancels a visit here and goes there. So it would be absolutely irresponsible to say, you know what, they're not in the mix, because certainly they have kind of come from left field and are now in the mix. And over the course of the last week to 10 days, some of the Ole Miss folks have said, hey, we feel like we've made some progress here. And clearly they have. So we'll see how things break loose. But, here's the thing. 10 days before National Signing Day, here a couple of years ago, a lot of people thought Jeffrey Simmons was going to Ole Miss. I would say the majority of Mississippi State and Ole Miss people thought they were going to Ole Miss. But let me tell you what's interesting about that story. So the Sunday after his visit to Ole Miss, and if I remember correctly, they had the last visit, Jeff calls me. I used to recap Jeff's visits or whatever, and probably interviewed Jeff, I don't know, maybe a dozen times over 2 years. So Jeff calls me that Sunday and says, hey, do you want to do a story about my visit to Ole Miss? I said, well, Jeff, usually we allow the media for that site to do the visit recap. So it's kind of a professional courtesy. I mean, like, it would irritate me to no end. Like if, an Ole Miss writer called an Ole Miss commitment that was actually visiting Mississippi State before we had a chance to talk to him, because they want to set the edge on the narrative. But Jeff calls me. I say, hey, Jeff, let's do a story maybe in the next day or two, kind of preview on your decision, and let's let those guys from the Ole Miss Spirit catch up with you and do the interview. And so he continues to talk, and he goes, hey, I just want to let you know I'm not going to Ole Miss. It's going to be between Alabama and Mississippi State, but don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody. He said, I'll make sure you know. And so we just kind of let it lay out there. And then the day before his decision, before signing day, I got a phone call. It says, hey, Jeff would like for you to come to the press conference. And I says, well, listen, I'm not going to go to a press conference unless I know for sure who he's committing to. I won't say anything, but I need to know. So he's going to Mississippi State. And I still didn't trust it. I even got in the car and I was on my way to Macon, and I was like, man, if I go over here and this guy commits to Ole Miss, with all their media there, that's going to be awfully embarrassing. I don't want to waste my time. And so then I called the guy back, and he's like, hey, listen, he's going to sign with Mississippi State, but if you feel better just waiting and talking to him after the press conference, that's fine too. And so ultimately, he did sign with Mississippi State, as you guys are well aware, and put together an All-American career. So I just say that because a lot of people look, all right, now there's all this gnashing of teeth and hand-wringing about Jaquan Otis. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I expect him to go to Mississippi State, but I'm just using that to kind of put some context here that things change rapidly later in the process. There were a lot of people that showed up at Jeff Simmons' press conference wearing red and blue that had to take that ride up 45, take that drive of shame after they watched him commit to Mississippi State. So hang on. It's going to be an interesting ride, to say the least. And so I just share that with you just to make sure that everybody understands. This is not new territory. While it was an unexpected development with Jaquan Otis over the weekend, it is just kind of on brand for in-state recruiting in the state of Mississippi. So we'll see how things progress. Supposedly, he is going to meet with Mississippi State prior to leaving to go to Mississippi-Alabama practices. He has to report at 12:30 at Camp Shelby on Tuesday. So that visit will need to take place, obviously, sometime in the next 24 hours. But this is the last contact period before signing day. Things go dead midnight Sunday. No off-campus recruiting after Saturday. Not legal recruiting anyway, right? There's some people that do their best recruiting during the dead period. As we saw with T. Shepard. This is a young guy that had never officially visited at Ole Miss, and then out of the blue, next thing you know, he's going to Ole Miss. And so again, we have been through this whole thing before. We've all experienced this before. There is always a surprise, and there is always a situation where Ole Miss is trying to ruin signing day from the Mississippi State fans. It's very rare that we get through a signing day without a surprise. And I would say the last time we did was that last class with Joe. That's the Emmanuel Forbes class. We go through signing day and we have no negative feelings that day. Nobody flipped. Everybody that was expected to sign signed. Those are the things that happen. But those are few and far between. Every signing day, whether it be in February or December, there is always some sense of disappointment. Not necessarily with the class, but there's always something. There is always something that happens that is of the negative variety on the Mississippi State side. Just how it is. All right, let's take a look at, real quickly here. Let me give you a quick overview of the official visit weekend. We've got these stories are behind the paywall at Mississippi State, and so you can go check those out. If you are a Gene's Page subscriber, we have interviewed just about everybody. Paul Jones has traded some messages with Marquez Dortch. That story should be up this afternoon or evening. That's a 4-star commitment. At this point, we don't expect any drama with him. Khalid Moore, I interviewed him myself on Sunday. He is really, really excited. Said that ever since he committed to Mississippi State, he's never really entertained overtures from other schools. Said even if he had attended other games, he would have still been in love with Starkville and is excited about the defense and to be a Bulldog. That's a pretty big get. And I think that's the thing, too, sometimes when guys commit early, they kind of lose their hype a little bit. You know what I'm saying? It's like, hey, if this kid committed in December, we'd be like, oh my gosh, what a great get. Well, that's the thing. Khalid Moore actually committed to Mississippi State well before the dead period even opened up. March the 7th is when he committed to Mississippi State and has not wavered any since then. He has been true Maroon. Interviewed Donterry Russell, myself, defensive end prospect out of Provine High School. Of course, that's a younger brother of DeMonte Russell. Donterry tells me that, hey, I'm good. I'm done. I'm just waiting to sign. There has been some talk behind the scenes that Ole Miss was going to try to get him in this weekend. Doesn't look like that's going to happen. But the reality of it is, even if he did take a visit up there, he's locked in. Of course, his brother, his official visit host over the weekend. And this is a guy, too, 6'4", 200, kind of a long and wiry guy, probably needs a year or two with Tyson Brown. But he will be a pass rushing specialist at Mississippi State. Trent Singleton, another guy that committed early that I don't think people properly appreciate as a member of this class. Could be valedictorian in his class. And he is a guy, too, that can play multiple positions for you. We expect him to play safety at Mississippi State. There was some talk early on about him playing corner. I think it's safety all the way. I think once this guy gets in a college weight room, he's going to be a monster. Really like him a lot. He's a leader. Will be a very good addition to our program. And there should be an article up with him later today, maybe tomorrow. Janoris Hopson, I spoke to him myself, too. That's a slot receiver out of Horn Lake High School. Younger brother Jacoby Hopson recently picked up an offer from Mississippi State. We'll just sign the whole family. So Janoris locked in, ready to go. No drama with him, just kind of waiting to sign. Kamari Terrell, that was one of Paul's guys. Not exactly sure when he'll talk to him. If he'll talk to him, we'll kind of see how things progress. Trevion Williams, not a guy that does a lot of media. Matter of fact, I think 2 of the last 3 times that we've interviewed him have been in person. He's just not a guy that likes a lot of hype and stuff. And, I talked to him at camp this year, and he's a real engaging guy, but he just doesn't like a lot of hype. Now, here's the deal with him. I think it's to kind of, again, guard the back door a little bit. This is a guy that's been trending to Mississippi State for a long time. Now, Ole Miss is not going to give up. And he will be a guy later this week that I am sure they're going to be pushing to try to get him to visit them this weekend. Now, of course, Mississippi-Alabama game is in Hattiesburg on Saturday. Game would be over. So it would be an abbreviated visit, of course. But at this point, I don't expect him to take that visit, but I do expect Ole Miss to continue to try to get him. They have tried countless times to get him to take an official visit up there and have been unsuccessful. He has not set anything up. So, again, that's one that we'll watch. Still feel great about him, but I won't be the least bit surprised if you hear later in the week that Ole Miss is pushing for him to come in. Trent Ramsey and I have traded some text messages today. He is the offensive line prospect out of Carrollwood Day School there in Tampa, Florida. Looking forward to speaking with him. So Trent's flight got messed up on Friday, and so there was talk about it being, a Saturday, Sunday, Monday type deal. He and his family basically drive through the night rather than miss the festivities and the opportunity for Trent to be around the rest of the guys and enjoy the Saturday in Starkville. They drove and got here in the wee hours of the morning on Saturday morning. And then Trent was able to go through the full visit. Of course, they missed the Friday night dinner, but goes through the full day Saturday night, and then Sunday with the rest of the players. The thing that I say when I hear that is, who would do that if it's a casual affair? Who would make that kind of effort if they weren't really serious about Mississippi State? So eager to see what he has to say. You can find that article later today over at genespage.com. Jackson LaHue, if you have seen the pictures of he and his father, they look like a pair of Big Ten offensive linemen together. I mean, like his dad could probably still play, Jackson's out of Azle, Texas. Paul will hopefully have a story on him today. What we're watching with him is Texas has talked about potentially bringing him in for an official visit this weekend. Now, they have not offered him yet. And, of course, if they do offer and bring him in, that would be something that would be a difficult hurdle for Mississippi State to leap. He is currently committed to Virginia Tech. That will not stick. He will either be a Bulldog or potentially a Longhorn. At this point, is planning to sign in December. But I understand he had a good visit, and we'll see how things progress with him. And, again, you can look for that article hopefully today or tomorrow. But a very, very, very impressive looking offensive line prospect. Amarion Walker currently committed to Notre Dame. You begin to wonder, now that Brian Kelly is at LSU, do they take him? 6'4", 175, a guy that can really play, but has not done a lot of recruiting stuff. LSU kind of overlooked him. He's a 3-star guy. Of course, if LSU had been on him, he'd been a 4-star. It's just kind of how it works. But now that Brian Kelly is there, it would make sense that there could potentially be a flip of a Louisiana kid from Notre Dame to LSU. Kamari Rogers, Paul Jones had a story up with him last night. Kamari, of course, the former number 1 player in the state of Mississippi, currently ranked 3rd in the state. His size is a bit of an issue. And then, of course, you've got the ACL tear. But he's a guy, too, expected to make a full recovery. Committed to Miami, and it is an absolute mess down there. I think everybody sees it that way. It's a complete mess. Manny Diaz mercifully let go today. If you ever want to see a way not to handle a situation, just take a case look at Miami. It is absolutely a test case in absolute ineptitude. This has been rumored since November that Manny was out. I was told prior to the finale, regular season finale, that Manny was out, win or lose. But they would not make an announcement until they had somebody lined up. It's pretty clear that's Mario Cristobal, and I've said on this show and on Gene's page many times, contrary to the belief of some Ole Miss people, that it is Mario Cristobal's job to turn down. Mario Cristobal, of course, spurns Oregon and their $10 million a year extension. It's incredible the money we're talking about these days. It is absolutely incredible. He turns down Phil Knight and Nike and Oregon's $10 million per year extension. Now, we talk about connecting the dots. People say, man, why would Joe Moorhead take the head coaching job at Akron? Well, I hadn't spoken to Joe. I've reached out to Joe and offered my well wishes, and I do wish Joe the best. I think in the end, Joe knew this was coming and didn't want to go to Miami. That's a long way from home. He's already forever and a day away from his family there in Pittsburgh, all the way across the country there in Oregon. And so it's like, hey, we're not getting closer. We're kind of maintaining the same distance, even though it's a little bit warmer. And I don't know that he would want to raise his family in Miami. And so, lo and behold, he takes a job at Akron. So he's kind of back to his roots. I think that was kind of a harbinger of things to come. I think when you saw Joe take that job, I think that pretty much kind of solidified our thinking that Mario Cristobal is headed to Miami. That hadn't been announced yet, but I think the writing is clearly on the wall there. So what does that mean for Kamari Rogers? Now, what I'm told privately is Kamari really wants to come to Mississippi State. He really does. He spent a lot of time with Martin Emerson and the guys over the weekend, and that this is very close to happening. The talk all along was if Manny was retained, because he had a great relationship with Manny, that Miami would stay in it. Now, of course, that could be a one-year reprieve. Well, now it's been removed from consideration. And so now it really looks like it's trending more towards Mississippi State. Ole Miss was involved with him late. He elected not to take a visit to Ole Miss. It has been basically Miami and Mississippi State the last 10 days. So unless there's a new suitor that jumps in late, and it's so difficult to build a relationship late, this will probably boil down to a Mississippi State situation. I haven't quite pulled the trigger on Mississippi State for the crystal ball just yet, but I'm close. I'm close. It's a 4-star prospect ranked at 96, one of the highest rated prospects in the state of Mississippi, former LSU commitment. So we'll see how things progress there, but I feel like Mississippi State is in a really good position with him, right now. A.J. Allen out of Neville High School, Monroe, Louisiana. Paul has traded some messages with him. He did make it in on Friday. The discussion early on was it could be a Saturday, Sunday, Monday deal. Currently committed to TCU and was looking to visit Alabama next week. It appears that is off. Not really sure about where State stands with him. Of course, here's the situation that you have to kind of think about. Okay, we don't have to take a running back in this class. We took Hargrove late last year, and he ended up being a guy we'd talked about blue shirting, but he went ahead and signed earlier and counted for 2021. So we don't technically have a running back in this class that is a running back per se. And you say, well, Steve, we've had this long-time commitment, of course, from Dakota, and which is true. And I love Dakota Jordan. I think he's an outstanding player. I think he can play whatever he wants to play. But you run the risk of, if that's the only back in your class, what do you do if he ends up signing a pro contract for baseball this summer. I've had many people tell me he's not expected to go high, but he could go high enough to sign, which of course would preclude him from playing college baseball. He could still play football. But what if he decides, you know what, I'm not going to go to college at all? He may not do the A.J. Brown thing. He might do the Cord Sandberg thing, right? And so just forego college and then kind of come back later. And so you run the risk there of thinking, okay, if we need a back, we probably need to go get a back. So does that mean that we maybe don't sign Dakota Jordan in December? I think there's a good chance of that happening. I think you wait. I think you wait and save up scholarship until you know for sure. So does that mean February? Does that mean the summer? I don't know. But I don't think that Dakota Jordan will sign in December. So I'm just telling you that now. So if he doesn't, I don't want anybody to panic and think, oh my gosh, the world is falling apart here. No, that's good recruiting. You don't sign a guy unless you're certain he's going to report. Certainly not in December. And of course, if he gives some assurances, hey, listen, here's the deal. I'm going to go to college, then maybe you make that decision in February. But again, they don't know what the Major League Baseball draft's going to look like. He may have a great spring. And next thing you know, some people that were on the fence about him may say, hey, we need to give this kid some money. So that's something to really kind of watch as we kind of move forward. That's kind of where we stand today. So I'm going to bring you kind of what I expect to happen here in the next segment of the show. The final segment of the show brought to you by Portico. Going to do an extended recruiting update today. I've shared with you guys many times, I think Portico is absolutely the place to move if you're moving to Starkville. If you were considering buying like a ball game retreat home here, because there are a lot of you guys that what you do is you track up and down the highway, and you got these big trailers and everything else, and you bring all these grills, and you got the tents and all the chairs. It'd be nice to have a place to put that stuff and not necessarily in a storage facility. If you had a home up here, maybe that's the way you do. And maybe you would say, hey, if we had a home up there, maybe we'd go to more baseball games. Maybe we'd buy season tickets for basketball if we could be there regularly and didn't have to pay for a hotel. Well, Portico is the way to do it. You can get your ball game retreat home there. You can get your primary residence there, perhaps an investment property. Maybe you just Airbnb it out when you're not using it. I love the place. It's right there off of 12. You turn off of 82 onto 12, the very first right. And I've had so many people that said, hey, we live, our kids live near there. And it's a really cool and nice place. I think you'd be happy there. You'd be happy to bring your family there and raise your family, make some great memories there. 601-416-8075. That's to hit Brooks Bryan up to get more information. 601-416-8075. You do that, and here's the deal. You find out what fits for you. You can get a 2-bedroom up to a 4-bedroom, 4-bath house. Phase 1 completely sold out. We're into Phase 2 now. And so you can have some say in your lot. You can have some say in the housing plans. That's a cool thing to be able to have some part in the decision-making process. That way you don't have to buy a house and we like everything but this. If I'd have had it over, I'd have done this. Well, you can have some say in that, kind of get it the way you want it. That's a really cool thing. Check them out today. Make Portico your next move. Okay, so since we were together, of course, Cam East has left the class. And so let me give you a little background on that too. So here's the deal. He has kind of said openly that he wanted to sign in February at the signing day ceremony with his friends. Privately, there had been some discussion, of course, we're going to sign in December, and then we will hold the announcement. You remember we did that last year. We had a guy that was part of the NBC All-American broadcast. You remember that? Maybe you don't. You're like, oh, I don't know. And then Paul and Jones were like, hey, you don't need to worry about this kid. You don't need to worry about Dante because he's good. We didn't want to just kind of put it out there. But the reality of it is that Deontay Anderson had signed with us in December, and then we held it until he made his formal announcement as part of the All-American game. Now, they didn't play the game last year, but they still had the broadcast. So that was kind of the plan, is Cam would go ahead and sign, and then we would just kind of hold it. And then some people around him like, hey, well, if you sign, you can't take any visits, and Georgia Tech wants you to come in. That's 3-9, Georgia Tech, mind you. And so ultimately, the rubber met the road. It's like, hey, listen, we're 2 weeks away from signing day, and if we can't count on you, then we've got to go get somebody else. And so it's like, well, I want to wait and sign in February. Okay, cool. Well, here's the deal. We've got some other guys out there of comparable ability, and so we can't just sit back and hope for the best. Because what happens, and we went through this with DJ James and some others with defensive backs when Terrell Buckley was here a couple of years ago. It's like, well, he didn't sign in December, and then all those guys ultimately signed somewhere else in February. You recall that. Martin Emerson was the only guy that he was able to maintain. Greg Brooks, DJ James, Martin Emerson, those three were expected to be your defensive back class that year, and then ultimately we lose Greg Brooks to Arkansas. DJ James goes to Oregon, and you get Martin Emerson. That would have been a very talented group. We had them all committed early, and I wasn't a huge Greg Brooks fan. I know he's kind of been in and out of the starting lineup up there at Arkansas, but the reality of it is when they don't sign in December, you better worry. Of course, it worked out. We got Fabian Lovett, and Nathan Pickering, of course, wanted to take his trips, but maintained his true Maroon status. But, those are really kind of the exceptions rather than the rule. And so, basically, I go back to the Sylvester Croom line of thinking, if you're looking, we're looking. Mississippi State coaching staff are charged with getting the best 25 players annually to help us win a championship. That's what their job is. And so, if we had waited on East and then ultimately saw him sign with somebody else in February, the narrative would be, and it would be correct, we should have known better. There's no way we should have waited, because then all of a sudden we end up having to take some developmental linemen out of the portal and it doesn't work out. And we're going to hit the portal for sure. But the reality of it is this Cam East situation, the sticking point was, well, he don't want to sign. And some would say, well, you'd be patient with him. If he's Charles Cross, yes, you're patient with him. But he's not. He's a developmental lineman out of New Orleans from a great program. And, ultimately, I think in the end, this was the right call. Absolutely the right call. You push the issue, we let him call it a decommitment, and we move on with life. So Marquez Dortch is committed. I expect to keep him. Javay Gilmore, of course, Dante Russell, Khalid Moore. Braden Locke, let me give you some intel about that too. One of the last things that Dave Nichol did before we left Mississippi State for USC is he called Braden Locke and told him he needed to play for Mike Leach. How about that? How cool is that? Said, hey, listen, I'm going to USC. I want to thank you for everything. You need to play for Mike Leach. Braden Locke is good. Lucas Taylor, of course, is good. He's already taken his official visit. Xavier Thomas, we'll watch LSU. We'll see what Brian Kelly and those guys do. I doubt they go at him, but they may. So we'll see how things progress. But that's really the only thing we're worried about with him. R.J. Moss out of Biloxi. One of the things I've noticed with him, I hadn't seen a whole lot of this in-home visit stuff. There's some kids that don't tweet out the pictures, but I'm going to check on R.J. Moss. Caden Pope, of course, out of Savannah, Tennessee. Recent commitment to Mississippi State, committed back on November 24th. I told you guys about Trent Janoris. Then there's Wesley Miller, of course, the commitment from Columbus, Mississippi, an undervalued member of our class, in my opinion. Now, Davian Collins has already taken his official visit here, committed back in August, and then Jackson Cannon has already been here as well. And so you look at this and you say, okay, should be able to hang on to what we've got. You can't assume that, but as it looks today, that's how it appears to be, that we should hang on to what we got. Now, I say that, and there always seems to be something that happens late. Always, always, always. But so we'll keep our nose to the ground and our ear to the ground. I guess our nose to the grindstone or ear to the grindstone, whichever you guys would prefer. And, we'll take a look at this thing. Now, let's look at some of the other targets we have out there. Of course, we mentioned Jackson LaHue. I think it's still too close to call with him. I think Trent Ramsey is probably leaning to Mississippi State. I think that is something that we'll continue to kind of monitor, obviously. But I'm looking forward to hearing from him. And then there's Percy Lewis, of course. Percy Lewis, one of the top junior college offensive line prospects in the country out of Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College. From down around McAdams, it's a State-Ole Miss battle. We knew that it would be. We knew that he wasn't going to Oregon, and he's not. He visited Ole Miss this past weekend, didn't do much in the way of media, but did say that he planned to make his official visit to Mississippi State, and then we'll kind of see how things progress from there. That's the main thing. You get him on campus, you got a shot, right? That's what makes the Otis thing so disconcerting. Even though he hadn't officially visited a lot of schools, it's disappointing. You expect to get him here and he doesn't show up. The writing's kind of on the wall there in many respects. It really is. It's a pretty big move there. But Percy Lewis, of course, a lot of connections here, a lot of connections there. Yeah, I'm told that the depth chart at Mississippi State is more favorable in his eyes, so we'll see how things progress. But, we still got a lot of room to work with to get to the 25. And, of course, there is the one-time exemption, too, where you can get back up to 85. We weren't going to have, contrary to popular belief, we were not going to have any issue getting back up to 85 this year. So in order for us to sign more than 25, we're going to have some more guys leave. And, of course, Aaron Brule left last week, so that opens up a spot. Of course, there's 2 backers that have left within the last couple months, Rodney Gross and Aaron Brule, which makes this a 2 to 3 linebacker class, a 4 linebacker class. Hopefully you'll add Stone Blanton. That's the expectation today. I think you add Stone Blanton, you add Avery Sledge. I think you can feel good about those guys. I think you can get excited about those guys. I think it's one of those things you look at and you begin to think, okay, this class has the potential to be a really good class for Mississippi State. I don't think there's any question about that. So, yeah, I'm counting Stone Blanton. I'm still considering Mississippi State the leader for Percy Lewis, despite his recent visit to Ole Miss. Larry Simmons has talked about making an official visit to Mississippi State. I don't think there's any doubt that he will sign with Ole Miss on National Signing Day. It'd be nice to flip him. I think he is the best receiver in the state. But I do expect him to stick with Ole Miss. We mentioned A.J. Allen a little bit earlier too. But kind of getting down the list here, Calvin Dinkins is a guy, a defensive tackle prospect. I think he is your replacement for Jaheim Otis. If Otis doesn't come, I don't think there's any question you take Calvin Dinkins. A lot of people are kind of comparing him to Cameron Young. Said he is in that same type of mold, big, physical, country boy guy that hadn't had a lot of strength and conditioning around him. He's just kind of a country strong kid that is kind of raw but has some incredible athleticism. And so is he on Jaheim Otis's level? Not right now, but maybe he could be in a couple of years. So we'll see. But I suspect that you'll see Calvin Dinkins and Avery Sledge and Chris Bell join the class between now and National Signing Day. And then, of course, we're still looking for some older DBs. We'll see how that kind of plays out. Jaquan Frazier expected to be here this weekend, as is Desmond Williams. Frazier from Coffeyville Community College out in Kansas, and then Desmond Williams from East Central Community College over in Decatur. He officially visited Tennessee over the weekend. Now, DeCarlos Nicholson is a guy that was a one-time Mississippi State commitment. He is now currently committed to Kentucky. Expected to visit Mississippi State this weekend. Ole Miss still in the mix. Florida State still in the mix. Maybe not as much in the mix as they once were, but you can't count anybody out this time of year. I think things are trending more positively, but I still kind of get a Jadarius Perkins feel from this. Of course, you remember he was a Mississippi Gulf Coast corner last year that was expected to sign with Mississippi State on Christmas Day, and then it lingered on and lingered on. Then he ended up going to Missouri and transferring from Missouri to Florida. And so it has been a winding road for Jadarius Perkins. I don't think it's going to be that kind of circus, but I get some of those same kind of vibes from DeCarlos Nicholson. I think he's very impressionable. But I do think he could end up in the class. I'm not saying that he is going to be in the class, but I do think there is still a very good possibility that he flips from Kentucky to Mississippi State. It's a long way from Petal, Mississippi to Lexington, Kentucky. And it's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll. All right, that's going to do it for today. Listen, if you hadn't done so, go to dogpilethebook.com. I can't guarantee you Christmas delivery. And I'm just being straight up with you. They're still kind of, him-hawing around. And here's the thing. I think they're just scared to tell me. And I'm not scared to tell you. As much as I love you guys, if you've ordered Dogpile, I don't think it's going to be there before Christmas. I hope that it does. I haven't been officially told that. But this may be something that lingers into January. And so I hate it. I have done everything that I can do to prevent it. I worked 18 hours a day, 6 days a week for 6 weeks and got this thing finished up on August 26th, so we'd have some time to edit, and then the printer would have plenty of lead time to get this thing out to you guys. And I guess that's just kind of part of the deal when you don't write books for for Simon Schuster. That's just part of the deal. But it will be released sooner rather than later. And we're going to be doing some marketing stuff, that sort of stuff. So I'm just telling you, if you don't get it before Christmas, don't think that it's anything that was planned or it's just kind of part of the process. There's this national paper shortage, or so they tell me, that has delayed a lot of things. As a matter of fact, my publisher has multiple books with this printer, and everything's gotten pushed back. And then we talked to our bookstores, and we find out that we're not alone, that it's just there's thousands of books out there that were expected to be delivered before Christmas that aren't going to be. And so, again, I don't have any official word, but I'm telling you now, if that's what you were thinking, that you would be able to get it before Christmas, because that was what I was expecting, for months. I can't make you that guarantee because they haven't given me that assurance, and I'm just trying to be upfront with you guys too. Now, of course, we'll get you your book as soon as we have it. The rest of the story is that if you want Alpha Dogs and Stark Villains and Flim Flam, you can get those right now. And a bunch of you have. Matter of fact, I signed about 50 books on Friday, I guess it was, that is on its way. So you'll be able to wrap those and put those under the tree. And so if you're looking for those, you can find them through Outgrade bookstores in Mississippi, or you can order through dogpilethebook.com. If you're looking for Blooms of Oleander, of course, you can find it at Amazon.com, booksofmegan.com, barnesandnoble.com, or through your local bookstore. I've rambled on enough today. We'll be back on Wednesday. And again, no basketball this week during the midweek, but we will have some recruiting updates, and that'll be the crux of our show Wednesday. And we'll also kind of review the SEC season and kind of look at the winners and losers of the SEC. And it's difficult to say we had a ton of losers when only one team is bowl ineligible, and that being Vanderbilt, who went 2-10, a surprise to nobody. Could have easily been winless team this year, but you hope they kind of get it figured out over there. But an unprecedented year in our league to have 13 teams bowl eligible, and all 13 go in bowling, and not by default this year. How about that? Everybody actually earned bowl eligibility. So we'll see how things progress. We'll look forward to that and being with you guys on Wednesday. And again, this is a great time to join GenesPage.com, the Mississippi State affiliate of 247 Sports. And I'm getting regular requests now. It's funny how these waves go. I guess it's Christmas time. If you want that Stark Villain hoodie, you can find it at starkvillains.com. Starkvillains.com. And it's funny, every so often somebody says, oh my gosh, my kid loved this book, or my husband loved this book. And they find out we have Stark Villain shirts and hoodies, and like, oh, I'm getting him that for Christmas. So some of you are getting that for Christmas. You can find them again at starkvillains.com. That's it for today, man. We'll see you soon. You guys have a great week. But until next time, let's all live our lives in a way we make more friends than enemies, and people can see a difference in the way we live.
Hello, this is Discover, and we take customer service very seriously. We know that if you have a question or concern about your credit card, that's a serious matter, and you need to talk to a real person about it. So we offer around-the-clock access to seriously talented representatives in the USA. Again, it's a serious endeavor. The only funny thing about it is Bob. If you call us and Bob answers, you're in for a treat. Get 100% US-based customer service and talk to a real person day or night. Discover. Exceptionally common sense.
Hear that? Is that America cheering or a sausage patty sizzling to perfection? It's time to cheer for Egg McMuffin and fresh cracked eggs at McDonald's. It's time to wake up to the aroma of freshly baked biscuits and treat yourself to a real honest-to-goodness morning meal. Breakfast, it's on at McDonald's. Now get any breakfast sandwich for just $2. Available only through the app. Mobile order and pay available at participating McDonald's. McD app download and registration required.